I'm 18 years old, though I don't look it. Where I live, you need to be 18 to buy knives or lighters. The store has a system where the cash register locks up if someone underage tries to buy these items. The register scans your ID, and if you're even one day under 18, it shows invalid ID. Enter password to return to checkout. Only managers have this password, so if no manager is around, that register is out of commission. I'm a regular at this store, so most employees know me by name. The store layout is awkward. You walk in the door, turn left into the shopping area, and the checkout line is blocked off by racks. If someone blocks the path, it's hard to navigate through the store or back out. I had just finished shopping for dinner, spaghetti ingredients and lighters for my incense. There was also a small black pocket knife being held for me. I got in line behind this teenager who looked about 16 or 17 and waited my turn. The cashier, I'll call her Allie, started helping him. He'd picked out a pocket knife and some lighters. Allie asked if that would be all for him, and he said yes. When she looked at his ID, she asked him to verify his age. The teenager said he was old enough and told her to just scan the items. Allie tried explaining that his ID showed he was too young, but he said his birthday was tomorrow and told her to just do her job and sell him the stuff. Allie gave up arguing and scanned his items, then his ID. As expected, the machine flashed the lockout message. The manager was on break. Allie told him she had tried to warn him it wouldn't work. The teenager said he wasn't leaving without his items. By this point, I'd been waiting an extra 10 minutes. Allie called over her co-worker, who opened register 2 and waved me over. As I talked with the co-worker and got my things scanned, a woman walked in, the teenager's mother. The mother asked her son if he had paid yet because they needed to leave. The teenager said the cashier wasn't letting him pay. Allie told her that his ID had locked the register and she couldn't activate any functions to allow payment. The teenager said she was lying. The mother got angry, saying how dare Allie hold up her son. She said he was old enough and should be allowed to pay. Allie told her she couldn't open any functions until a manager arrived. The mother told her to get the manager, saying she wanted to get Allie fired. Allie told her that the manager was on break and they could wait. The teenager told his mother he wanted his presents. Allie told him he was too young and she couldn't sell the items to him. The mother said Allie was lying and offered to scan her ID instead. Allie told her the system didn't work that way. I put my lighters on the counter at register 2 and asked if they still had the knife I wanted. The coworker said yes and pulled out a tiny multi-tool pocket knife from behind the counter. The coworker asked if that would be all or if I needed new headphones again. I said I was fine with just those items. The coworker scanned my ID and I paid. That's when the mother noticed and got upset. She said I looked the same age as her son. When Allie tried to explain, the mother interrupted, saying I must have a fake ID. Allie told her my ID wasn't fake. The teenager walked over to me and held out his hand. I looked confused and tried to walk away, but he blocked me. He told me to give him my ID since his didn't work. I said no, adding that the machine didn't work that way anyway. The mother praised her son's idea and told me to hand over my ID. I said no again. Allie asked the mother to stop bothering me, saying I had done nothing wrong. The co-worker asked her to move as she was blocking the line. The mother said 1 sec as she reached for my ID. I warned her not to touch me. I'm military trained and have a lot of strength due to a birth defect. The mother brushed off my warning. I told her that if she touched me, she would be restrained. I said this loudly with the camera recording to protect myself. The mother grabbed the arm where I kept my wallet. Allie was calling the police while I grabbed the mother's wrist and restrained her. I didn't hurt her, just took her wrist and held it behind her back, pushing her down. She was small, so this was the best way to handle it without causing injury. I was just stopping things from getting worse. The teenager looked scared while his mother yelled. The police arrived and I let go since I didn't want to look like I started it. The mother made up a story about unhelpful employees and said I had attacked her. Allie said that wasn't what happened, and the co-worker offered to show one of the officers the video. One officer went to view the footage while the other took statements from everyone. I told the truth and said I had warned her. The mother made up her version, but Allie's statement matched mine. When the first officer returned, he told the mother she was coming with him and asked if I wanted to press charges. The mother said she did want to press charges, and the officer told his partner to cuff her. The officer asked if I wanted to press assault charges, and I said yes because she had dug her nails into my wrist. The mother acted shocked and yelled about her rights, while the second officer read her rights. Everyone who had to wait in line got a free item under $5. At the hearing, the mother cried and claimed insanity. After a checkup, she was placed in a hospital. I had to get a restraining order against her husband after he came banging on my door and yelled at me for 30 minutes. When he finished, I told him to get off my lawn. He kept banging on my door, cracking it, so now I'm pressing charges for damage to my property. If she hadn't claimed insanity, this could have gone on for a year or more. I live in a downtown high-rise apartment building in a major city, with about 20 floors and roughly 15 units per floor. Our building is constantly busy. Like many major cities, we have a housing crisis, so every space is occupied and common areas are always packed. Being downtown means our rent prices are through the roof. A few months ago, something happened that still leaves me confused. I was leaving my apartment when someone called out to me from the elevator area. I saw a woman I didn't recognize and figured she must be a new tenant. I asked how I could help her, and she pointed toward the other end of the hallway. She wanted me to make sure her cats didn't get into my apartment or the elevator. I looked down the hall and saw two orange cats that looked young, probably less than a year old, just hanging out in the hallway. I thought they must have run out when she opened her door, which happens with pets sometimes, and she was trying to get them back into her unit. I told her I'd help and asked if I could pet the cats. When she said yes, I petted them, locked my door, and walked to the elevator. I noticed she was taping a sign above the elevator button saying, "Please do not let the orange cats onto the elevator." I tried to be friendly and mentioned that my pets can be escape artists too. She told me the cats hadn't escaped at all. She lived in one of the smaller units, and her cats seemed bored inside her apartment, so she was going to prop her door open whenever she was home and let them explore the hallway. She said they were cute and everyone would love them. She was putting up the sign to make sure nobody let them into the elevator, and if people shooed them away from the elevator, everything would be fine. I stood there trying to understand what I'd heard. Who would think it's okay to let their cats roam a busy apartment hallway? Our building is dog-friendly, and we live in a high-crime city. Yet she was comfortable leaving her door open all day. She noticed my confused look and added more. The sign she made was only temporary. She planned to ask building management to print a proper one with the building's letterhead. She was sure they wouldn't mind because the property manager was nice. I didn't know what to say. I just smiled, nodded, wished her a good day, and hoped this strange situation would sort itself out. I love cats. Even though I'm allergic, I have two of my own. But I would never think it's okay to expect strangers to watch my pets every day because they're bored in my apartment. Not everyone likes animals, and some people have allergies. There were safety issues too. Almost every apartment has a dog, and the cats could easily go into someone's apartment, the elevator, or a stairwell. Our building doesn't have security cameras in the hallways. The woman really believed our corporate property management company would approve her plan. She thought they would make official paperwork telling all residents that her pets were now everyone's responsibility. She talked about it casually, like she was discussing the weather. When I came home later that day, the sign was gone. I never saw that woman or her cats again, so I don't know what happened. But I imagine when she called management, they laughed at her request. I wish I could have heard that conversation. Some people live in their own reality, where they think their comfort is more important than everyone else's safety. Thinking an entire floor should adapt for your cat's boredom is truly mind-boggling. This happened a few years back when I worked as a company clerk in the army. I wasn't always behind a desk, but that's how things turned out. I'd been in the army for about 3 years when I got transferred to Fort Hood in Texas. Everything was fine until I started having weird reactions during field training. My eyes would swell up, I'd break out in hives, and sometimes I could barely breathe. After a couple trips to the emergency room, the army doctors found out I was allergic to some local shrub that grew all over the training areas. The diagnosis came with orders: no outdoor duties, office work only. I wasn't happy about it, but I could still serve. My wife had just found out she was pregnant with our first child, so a desk job wasn't the worst thing. That's when the trouble started. Our new commanding officer was a West Point graduate who thought the sun rose and sat on his combat boots. From day one, he made it clear that if you weren't training 24/7, you weren't a real soldier. The first time I handed him my medical profile, he looked at it like I'd given him a resignation letter written in crayon. He asked if I was telling him I couldn't go outside because of plants. When I tried to explain it was a severe allergy that doctors said could be life-threatening, he scoffed and repeated life-threatening, then said I was getting to sit in an air-conditioned office while real soldiers were out training. That set the tone for the next year and a half. He never missed a chance to make my life hard. During company formations, he'd single me out. He would call me Specialist Chairborne in front of everyone and tell the other soldiers that while they were defending our nation, I'd be making coffee and typing memos. He'd call me into his office just to remind me how useless he thought I was. Once, he told me that seeing a healthy-looking soldier hiding behind a medical profile made him sick. He went on about how his grandfather stormed the beaches at Normandy with pneumonia, then asked what his grandfather would think of me. The worst part was when he found out my wife was pregnant. This made him even angrier. He started calling our house early on weekends. One Sunday at 6 a.m. he called saying I needed to come in to reorganize the supply closet. When I mentioned the early hour, he said sorry for the inconvenience before saying that having a company clerk who thinks the army is a 9-to-5 job was a real inconvenience. My wife would cry when the phone rang early in the morning. She was dealing with a difficult pregnancy, and the stress wasn't helping. The only person who made it bearable was the first sergeant. He was an old-school NCO who judged people by their work, not their medical profiles. He would sometimes whisper in my office, telling me not to let the CO get to me. He'd say I was doing great work and was the best company clerk he'd had in years. When I told him how hard it was to want to come to work, he told me to keep my head down, saying officers like the CO usually burn out. Things came to a head when I got orders for an early discharge. My wife's pregnancy had complications, and the Army decided to let me out a few months early to take care of her. But when the CO found out, he walked into my office. He said I was abandoning ship, and when I tried to explain about my wife's needs, he cut me off and said he didn't want to hear about my personal problems. He told me to process my paperwork and get out of his unit. That same day, I heard him bragging on the phone about his upcoming assignment. He'd gotten orders to be a training officer at the Command and General Staff College, a position that would fast-track his career. He was gloating about it to anyone who would listen. That's when I decided enough was enough. As company clerk, I had access to everything: personnel files, orders, building keys. Everything the Army runs on is paperwork, and I controlled it all. This was before everything was digital, when losing a paper file meant it was actually gone. The night before my final day, after everyone left, I stayed late finishing up paperwork. I collected all the CO's personnel folders, his evaluations, awards, training certificates, and his orders to the Command and General Staff College. Then I got creative. I packaged them into several different envelopes, each sent to random Army posts around the world. One went to Korea, one to Germany, a couple to different bases in the States. I didn't put return addresses, just made sure they had enough postage. The timing was perfect. The company was leaving for a 2-week field exercise the day of my discharge. The CO wouldn't even be there, and by the time anyone noticed the missing files, they'd be scattered around the globe. My final day was simple. I signed my discharge papers, cleared post, and drove away from Fort Hood without looking back. About 3 months later, I got a letter from one of the sergeants I used to play poker with. He wrote that the CO went crazy when he got back from the field exercise and realized his personnel files were missing. His orders to the staff college were cancelled because they couldn't verify his records. Now he was stuck rebuilding his entire file from scratch, and half his awards and evaluations were gone. The sergeant said the CO was furious, and while nobody knew what happened, he thought I might like to know. I smiled reading the letter. The CO's career had hit a roadblock. All those promotions he was counting on would be delayed by years, if they came at all. Some might say what I did was wrong, but after months of harassment, making my pregnant wife cry, questioning my integrity in front of the entire company, I saw it as payback. Even us Cheerborn Rangers know how to fight back when pushed too far. The most important lesson any officer should learn is never mess with the company clerk. We might not be in the field dodging bullets, but we control the paperwork, and in the army, paperwork is power. When I was about 9 or 10, I was a real piece of work. This was back in the 80s when parents kicked you out of the house after breakfast and expected you home by dinner. My favorite hangout was the park around the block from my apartment building. Our building had a large community room on the ground floor that people could rent out for events, birthday parties, club meetings, anything. Most weekends, that room was booked solid, sometimes with events going until late at night. One Saturday, my friends and I were at the park when we noticed the community room had all its curtains drawn with loud music coming from inside. There was some kind of party happening, and to a bunch of bored kids, that sounded exciting. We knocked on the door and politely asked if we could join the party. The teenager told us to get lost and called us little jerks. The door slammed in our faces. If he had been nice about it, maybe said we were too young or it was a private event, we would have walked away. But being called little jerks when we were being polite, that crossed a line. My first friend said the teenager was a jerk. The second friend said we should do something about it. The third friend agreed but asked what we could do. We huddled together thinking of ideas for revenge. Some suggested throwing rocks at the windows, others thought about pulling the fire alarm. Nothing seemed right until I looked over at the lawn. There was the biggest dog turd I had ever seen. It was massive, fresh, and disgusting. I knew what to do. I pulled out my handkerchief and found 2 small twigs. My friends watched as I picked up the turd using the twigs like chopsticks, putting it on the handkerchief. My first friend asked what I was doing and said it was gross. The second friend started to ask if I was really going to do what they thought. I told them to watch me. I had noticed one of the windows to the community room was open a crack. It was the perfect target. As I walked toward it with my disgusting payload, my friends realized what I was planning. My first friend said he was leaving. He ran back to the park. The rest of us kept going. I went to the window, careful not to be seen. I could hear the music and laughter getting louder as I got closer. With my friends watching, I stood on my tiptoes and aimed at the small opening. I threw the dog turd through the crack in the window. Instead of hearing a plop of it hitting the floor, there was a splash sound. My second friend asked what that sound was and what the turd had hit. Before I could answer, we heard a girl screaming from inside. She yelled about something disgusting. Another voice said it was dog poop in the punch bowl. Several people said they had just drunk some of the punch. My second friend said, "Oh no," and ran away from the scene. The music stopped. Through the window, we heard gasping, retching, and angry voices. The angry teenager said he would kill whoever did it. Another voice said someone had thrown it through the window and might still be outside. I laughed. I couldn't help it. My last friend and I looked at each other, and we knew it was time to leave. I told my friend to run. We ran faster than ever before. I heard the community room door opening behind us, but we were already halfway down the block. My last friend said he couldn't believe what I had done and worried we would be in trouble if caught. I told him they wouldn't catch us. We ran until we reached the other side of the park, falling on the grass, out of breath but laughing. I asked my friend if he had seen their faces. He said he hadn't seen them but had heard them and mentioned that the turd had landed in the punch bowl. We spent the afternoon hiding out, thinking a mob of angry teenagers would be looking for us. They never found us, though word got around the neighborhood about the punch bowl incident. For weeks afterward, I took different routes to avoid the community room. Eventually, the story became neighborhood legend, though no one ever found out I did it. Now I realize how disgusting and awful that prank was. Those teenagers probably had their party ruined. But at the time with a big grin on my face and my heart racing, it felt like a victory.